First of all, thank you for joining us again for Beyond the Podium. You're seeking a third term in office. During this last term, Congress set some modern records for inability to pass legislation. Your party in control of the House has even struggled to maintain the leadership with 2 challenges to the Speaker, one successfully removing them. What do you say to those who claim your party is not showing the country that they can effectively govern when in the leadership?
Yeah. Well, what I will say is I don't like the chaos and dysfunction even within my own party, and I've stood against that. I've been outspoken about I don't think we should be governing that way. I think we should be focused on the issues that are affecting the American people, and that's what I've still tried to move forward even amidst some of those, shall we call them family fights. But I think when I look at the issues I have focused on, and I've still been a successful legislator even in divided government, and even when I was in the minority, I'm still working to get things done, and that's been my priority. I'm a mom who drives a minivan, and I understand my constituents here in Iowa. I'm not forgetting where I'm coming from, and I'm hoping to deliver in my 3rd term on the priorities Iowans sent me there to work on, which regardless of like I said, the family fights that we've had in Washington, D.C., the priorities I'm hearing about in the district are about rampant inflation, about energy security, about national security, and those are the things that I have prioritized this term, and I look forward to continuing to work on.
Well, let's start on that first one on inflation. It has now fallen to levels far closer to where the Federal Reserve believes they can continue to lower interest rates. Most economists agree what brought on this inflationary issue was global issues, supply chain issues and the like. The inflation rate here in the United States has fallen faster than it has in other countries. What more do you think the administration could have done to bring it down faster? Because it seems like we are faring a lot better than the rest of the world right now.
Well, across the board, when I talk to people, they don't feel that relief. Food prices are still significantly higher, and the way inflation works is it's not like it's just dropping back to the prices it was in 2020. Inflation is compounding, and that is a very real pain and a very real tax on American families. Things are tough right now. I think that when you look at this administration and their energy policies over the last couple of years, they've been really anti-domestic energy production, and I think that kind of push has put us behind strategically. It's put us behind in innovation, and it's put us behind competitively on the global stage. I serve on the Select Committee for Competition with China. That's a country that does not care about the environment. They don't care about their people, and they are propping up a new coal-fired power plant every single week. We can do it cleaner and we can do it cheaper here in the United States, but this administration and this EPA are doing everything they can to torpedo American energy. So I think we absolutely need to be innovating. We need to be focused on clean energy and producing energy cleaner, but you can't cut us off at the knees to spite our face, and that's what's happened on the global stage, and that's also putting us at a disadvantage economically. So I think energy policy is one of the first places that we could look to help revitalize our economy and lower the cost of goods and services. Farmers are the ultimate consumers of energy, right? So you look at what they're dealing with input costs, not just fertilizer, but diesel and transportation costs, insurance costs, all of those things have seen the impacts of inflation go up, and I'm afraid that that's the new baseline for where things are. So that puts us at a long-term disadvantage. So I would focus on energy first, as if we're able to hopefully get the majority again in the House, in the Senate, and in the White House. I think energy production and domestic production is going to be a key priority.
You say the administration, the EPA have been putting up roadblocks, but we're producing more oil than ever before, more energy than ever before. There was a report last week that Saudi Arabia is now abandoning its mission to get $100 per barrel oil because they're losing business to the United States and are now planning to produce more oil to try and counter that. So it doesn't sound like to me that they're really hindering it to the point where we're not producing more. Do you really think that it should be much more than that? Because it seems like we are meeting the needs. There's just a global aspect of this that isn't necessarily in our control.
Well, and it's not just oil. You're speaking like it's siloed. It's not. Energy is across the board, all of the above and all of the below. And this administration has cut off things like liquid natural gas and the exports of that to places like Europe, which are relying upon places like Russia for energy. So that's where we need to be really looking at producing more, being competitive, and allowing that to happen. By cutting off the shipments of those to our allies, we're emboldening our adversaries. We've seen that with Russia. We've seen that with Iran. And those people don't have the good interests of America in their hearts, right? And we're seeing that play out on the global stage right now. So when I say we need to unleash American energy, it's all of the above, all of the below. Mandates, one-size-fits-all mandates, moving to EVs, for example, only benefit countries like China that are producing many of those parts. Might I add, with slave labor, we don't do that here in the United States. So I think when you look at the big global picture, as you're talking about here, those are all things that we need to be considering when we're focused on American energy policy.
You brought up China. You serve on a committee looking at some of the issues that the U.S. faces with China. You've been calling for many options to not only limit China's influence here, but also limit their ability to own businesses, to own property here in the United States. There's been a lot of criticism of a bill that you sponsored, the Ending Agricultural Trade Suppression Act. Many of your colleagues on both sides of the aisle have called it a poison pill, especially for the Farm Bill, which we're still struggling to see get through Congress right now. Do you still support that measure? And what do you say to Iowa farmers and Republicans who say that it would open the door to China ownership here in America?
Well, the intent of the bill is to protect Iowa producers, not to help China. And that's been my entire goal. And anyone who thinks that there's any effort to support China clearly hasn't been following the work that I've been doing on that committee. That bill specifically is to push back on an initiative out of California, Prop 12, which they passed, which limits severely how Iowa producers can raise their animals. I think it's wrong for one state to tell another state what to do. California's 13% at least of the pork market in this country. So this is an interstate commerce issue, plain and simple. So the EATS Act was our initial piece of legislation to fix what Prop 12 did that was negative to our producers here in Iowa. Compliance with Prop 12 was a significant cost for, you talk about incentivizing conglomerates. If you have to pay $3,000 or $4,000 per sow to accommodate these changes, that's a huge burden on our small guys here in Iowa. So that's what this bill was really aiming to do, was to protect those producers.
Are you confident, though, that if it were to pass, it would alleviate that issue but not open the door to China?
Absolutely. And actually, the compromise language that we came up with is in the Farm Bill. And this is something I worked across the aisle with a lot of my colleagues from agriculture states. I talked to many of my colleagues in California about this since it was proposition in their state. But our language, which the Supreme Court basically said, hey, we're going to uphold Prop 12, but Congress, you need to do something. Even our Ag Secretary, Tom Vilsack, said if this is allowed to stand, this will create chaos in the markets across the country. So our compromise language, which is included in the Farm Bill, which that's another conversation about, we need to get that done, but it respects states' rights. And it still allows California to regulate its own producers. So if Californians say we want hogs that are raised this way in hog Hiltons, which is not realistic for Iowa farmers, then they can say, okay, yeah, we're gonna require that here in California, but they can't put that same burden on Iowa producers.
We have seen a large variety in laws passed across the country since the fall of Roe v. Wade. I believe in 2021 you were part of a bill, co-sponsored a bill that would have created a federal ban on abortion. You haven't have had such support for a bill since the fall of Roe v. Wade. Where do you stand on this issue today, and what role does the federal government play, even though it is largely back in the hands of the states?
Yeah, well, I am pro-life, and my position on that has not changed. What I think is important in this conversation is that we focus on policies that are helping to protect the whole spectrum of life, and that's what you've seen out of my body of work in Congress since I got to Congress in 2021. I've supported, and my goal is to support bills that are going to help to save as many lives as possible. And so you've seen me work on over-the-counter birth control access, trying to urge the FDA to move faster on approving pills that have already been approved for adult women, making sure that those could become available over the counter faster. I think being pro-life also means supporting maternal health care. I've secured a number of investments through my role on the Appropriations Committee in maternal health research, prevention efforts, as well as investing in maternal health care centers here in Iowa. You know, one of the things that we struggle with here in Iowa is we have maternal health care deserts. We have 6 counties, I believe, in my congressional district that don't have a provider. So that's a place where I've been focusing a lot of my efforts in the past few years, is how can we make sure women, no matter what zip code they're in, have access to care. And then finally, I would point to, you talk about maybe Congress not passing a whole lot of bills, but one of the ones we actually passed and is a law is mine this year. It's called the Maternal Health and Stillbirth Prevention Act. And it specifically directs block grant dollars can be used in states to educate women about stillbirth, and hopefully prevent that. 1 in 4 stillbirth, I believe, is preventable. That's the loss of a pregnancy after 20 weeks. So I think when I look at what being pro-life in Congress means, it's working on all of those policies to help support women and help support families.
But does that also mean enacting some type of federal law putting restrictions on abortion?
Look, the United States is one of only 7 countries that does not have any limit on abortion, other than some late-term abortion protections. Many countries have 20-week bans and 15-week bans. That's what I had signed on to support, was a 15-week ban. My goal, again, is to work on policy that's going to save as many lives as possible, and that's what I see the federal government's role as.
We saw pretty strong bipartisan support for arguably one of the most conservative immigration bills to come through Congress in the past year, only to see it fail after former President Trump spoke out against it. Was he right to speak out against it, and would you support that bill if it came up again?
Yeah. That bill had a lot of flaws, unfortunately, and I think when we look at what's happened at the southern border, that's a complete failure of this administration. Our border czar and Vice President Harris just recently, just a few weeks out from the election, decided to all of a sudden feign interest in what's happening at our southern border. We've got 10 million illegal immigrants who've come into this country, more than 3 times the population of the state of Iowa. We've got people on the terror watch list, thousands upon thousands of Chinese military-age men who've made their way across the southern border. Again, I don't think they have America's best interests at heart in trying to get around our laws. So when I look at the problems at our southern border, that bill would just continue the policies of the current administration, where they have made changes to essentially bypass the asylum system in this country. They've made it so anybody can come in and claim asylum. And I think that's wrong, and it's a slap in the face to all the legal immigrants to this country that I've talked to. My sister is married to a legal immigrant, so is my cousin. We rely on legal immigrants to this country, and we need to continue to provide legal pathways to come here. But that bill would allow, if you did the math on it, up to 1.8 million illegal immigrants to come in on asylum still every year. The right amount of illegal immigration in this country is 0, and I think if I've traveled the district and continue to hear from people, if there's one thing that I continue to hear, it's that people are very frustrated with what's happening at the southern border, and they want to see a stop to it.
But there were a lot of conservative asks in that bill. This was not a Democrat bill. There were Democrats and Republicans who weren't happy about it, as you said, because there were some things that each side didn't like. Isn't that the way that this should work, something over nothing in terms of making any kind of progress on this issue?
But if the nothing is so bad, then that's the problem, right? You have to have a sniff test that's going to pass the trust of the American people. And if the American people are saying we're tired of illegal immigration, why would you continue to incentivize it? I think the proper solution was the bill that we passed out of the House, H.R. 2. It not only would help support our CBP agents and ICE agents, which, by the way, this Homeland Security Secretary has undercut them every step of the way from being able to do their job, but it would also provide much needed funding for them and technology, which I think is the best thing we can do to help our agents right now to be able to do their job and really stop the bad guys, which I think is what, when I think about that as a mom, what keeps me up at night, it's the fact that we have a bunch of people in our country who we don't know who they are and where they are. And that should keep everybody up at night.
Last question. I know that you were there on January 6th. To this day, the former president still denies any wrongdoing for his words or actions that day. He still believes that he won that election, that it was stolen from him. Does that leave any concern in your mind that if he were to lose this November, the same thing could happen again?
No, I think you look at what I've done and what other members of Congress have done. We've clarified the process for certifying elections on January 6th. January 6th was a terrible day. I was there myself. I experienced it. I was hunkered down in my office, and I condemn anyone who broke the law that day, and I want people who do break the law to be held accountable. I've been very clear about that. Right now, I think the biggest threat to democracy in this country is the fact that we've seen 2 assassination attempts on President Trump's life. We need to be working to protect all of our leaders, and that's why I worked across the aisle to make sure we had a fix recently for the Secret Service so that they could get out there and protect President Biden, President Trump, Vice President Harris, and our vice presidential nominee in J.D. Vance. So I think that needs to be our focus, and you can count on me to be a voice of reason in Washington, D.C. going forward, and that's why I'm asking for folks to send me back for another term.
Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, thanks you for joining us once again.
Thanks, Nick.